You're moon landing. You're not a. You believe in the moon landing, right?
I used to believe in the moon landing.
You don't anymore?
I had a joke in my act about it, that before COVID, I would have told you vaccines the most important invention in human history, and after COVID, I'm like, I don't think we went to the moon.
Yeah, I know that was in your. But
Yeah.
you actually think that?
I think there is a less than zero possibility that we did not go to the moon. I know. Why do you think we went to the moon?
Because it's exactly what you just said about. Well, there's a lot of reasons, but the main thing is what you just said about the Earth. The vastness of the conspiracy that would be required to fake that. It's so vast that it's a lot more incredible to believe that we faked it than to believe that we just went. And going to the moon, it's a massive achievement. But I think the greatest human achievement of all time. But even so, to fake it would be even more massive. Because not only would you need all of these space agencies and all the different whatever people in American institutions to be colluding, but you'd also need foreign governments, including adversarial foreign governments, who at this point certainly would know we faked it, and for some reason haven't blown the lid on it. So they're letting us take this achievement that they know. Like, why haven't the Russians come out and said
all those things you're saying are true?
Right.
I don't argue with any of the things you're saying. But one of the things that I think you have to consider was.
I am fighting off a little bit of a cold, but it'll get better as I speak. So we are going to kind of go over why Matt Walsh is shocked, because basically Joe Rogan, without even knowing it, is defending flat Earth. So the same arguments, and Matt Walsh tries to explain this to Mr. Rogan, but the same arguments apply to flat Earth, right? If you're able to believe in that we never went to the moon and all that stuff, the same kind of variables apply. So I also wanted to debunk some of Matt Walsh's claims that, well, let's just begin. So in the US, there are over 4 million people with a security clearance, including those with confidential, secret, and top secret access to classified national security data. The process to obtain a security clearance is lengthy and can be denied for a variety of reasons, including criminal conduct, drug use, and evidence of security violations. The background investigation and continual monitoring process for a security clearance can be very intensive if all goes well. It can take between 6 months and 1 year to receive a security clearance. The level of clearance required depends on the position, responsibilities, and system used in the role. For example, agencies that deal with the military, federal law enforcement, diplomacy, and intelligence communities often require a higher level of clearance. But basically, there's 4 million of them now. If you could imagine, they could basically fill up how many stadiums worth of people? Probably 10, 15, 20, depending on the stadium, So, and to further drive home that point, as you can see here, as of April 2023, there are approximately 1.25 million, so 1.25 million people with a top secret security clearance in the United States. This clearance is granted to the government. So how many stadiums could you fill with 1.25 million people that are in on the top secret thing, right? And you got to also include their families, right? Getting ahead of myself here. So their families, you can add an extra couple of million if you include everybody. I mean, I know they're probably not supposed to tell their kids, but let's be honest. Seeing how, look at all the people that are famous, like Calvin and all the people in Rogan's sphere, how their parents are all CIA they're all in the inn, if you get what I'm saying. And so of course their kids, they're gonna let them in on the inn, and hopefully they can join the crew, right? The top secret security crew, right? So most NASA employees have some level of security clearance, often a lower level confidential clearance. So most NASA employees. I'm willing to bet all NASA employees, but there's probably one or two that they kind of keep, on the outs, just so they claim that not everybody at NASA is under security clearance, because that would be an obvious red flag, right? But even most NASA employees being, what do they got to keep secret, right? Don't they work for the people? And I get there's probably gonna be tons of comments saying like, oh well, they might be seeing satellites or nationals. Well, other countries are seeing the same things, right? So like, it's not, anyway, I don't want to get into the weeds here when it comes to why they have the clearances, but just know that everybody in NASA, and that's where we get all of our information when it comes to outer space. Some knuckleheads like to use their telescopes and look at a blurry, thing shooting across the sky, be like, look, that's the space station. And, there's a million ways to get that to happen. But sure, I've never seen it with my own eyes. I understand that people have, and I see the videos. Feel free to link them down in the comment section below if you feel the need to. But again, these are things that are kind of easy to fake, and it doesn't prove that we went to outer space or that outer space exists. Because if it was, then I mean, by all means, what about a plane? You see a plane flying out in the sky. Do you think it's in outer space or is it in sky? Well, the same thing happens with this space station. It's probably something that they launch. There's probably gravity up there, if you ask me. But anyway, that's a story for another tell. So let's get rid of those. We went over that. Let's see here. Now, do they work together? Why wouldn't they expose them? Well, what about the Antarctic Treaty, right? Isn't that enough to kind of say, okay, they're willing to work together in some regards? It's not like the U.S. couldn't tell Russia, look, here's the deal, right? And even then, as you can see here, the former Russian space chief repeats his claim that the moon landing was false, right? We got a bunch on that. Let's see here. So an RT, right? Dmitry Rogozin, the former head of Russia's space agency Roscosmos, endorsed the old U.S. moon landing hoax conspiracy theory in a Telegram post on May 7th. Rogozin said he had searched for years but not been able to find evidence that the United States landed on the moon. It was not clear to me how the United States, at the level of technological development of the 1960s, did what they still cannot do now. Boom, right? So who's going to believe them, one? And Russia probably didn't come out because they didn't want to look like the jealous, girlfriend saying, hey, your new boyfriend isn't as good as you think he is. Like, it reeks of jealousy. It reeks of all of that. So of course, and if Russia can't conclusively prove it, and it's Russia's word versus US, Russia comes off looking like, but again, they get along. We saw with the Arctic Treaty that they can agree to hide things or keep things from the rest of the world, right? They agree on some things. If they found something crazy up there, or if they hit a wall up there and they told the Russians, look, stop trying, here's our proof, we hit a dome. I don't know. I don't believe in the firmament. I don't believe in flat earth. I don't believe in hollow earth. I don't believe in globe earth. I don't believe in any of that. I believe in where I live. That's it. That's about it. Well, from as far as my eye can see, that's what exists. Everything else is in limbo until I see it, right? In my opinion. So anyway, the Russian state broadcaster RT reported Rogozin's comments this way: no proof. That's all in quotation marks. U.S. landed on moon, ex-Russian space boss. So they have been saying it, but of course, propaganda in the 60s and the ability to keep what the Russian cosmonauts are saying. I mean, all these variables come into play. Maybe they go and tell Russia, look, we have proof. We'll split the money with you of NASA that we get from NASA. Just say we did it. It's a big, who knows? There's a million different things they could have done. I mean, didn't NASA scientists, didn't we get half of them from the Nazis, right? And then the other half went to Russia as well, right? So it wouldn't be so crazy to think that these friends of scientists kind of came together and said, hey, I know we're on different parts of the country, but explain to your bosses and we'll explain to our bosses what we can do here, because they're shiesty individuals at the end of the day, right? They probably saw an opportunity to make quite the buck off of the American dollar, and the Americans were eager to support and fund, Operation Paperclip or whatever. So anyway, sorry to go off on the weeds here, but this is just more of information about it. So basically, the Apollo missions also took thousands of photographs and recorded thousands of hours of video and audio. So where is it, right? And then also, why'd you destroy most of it? And also, like, why? There's only one source. So, like, we have to trust. Like, it's easy to believe that they could have faked it because it all came from one source, right? And I understand that. What do I expect? A fucking camera, a news crew on the moon to await the Apollo? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's possible. It's very possible, right? So scientists say the massive number of people involved in the moon landing mission would have made pulling off a hoax infeasible. But remember the numbers I told you earlier, about 1 million, 1.4, 4 million plus their families. Well, about 400,000 scientists, engineers, technologists, machinists, electricians worked on the Apollo program. Rick Feinberg, the press officer of the American Astronomical Society, told History.com in 2019, if in fact the main motivation for believing in the moon hoax is you don't trust the government, you don't trust our leaders, you don't trust authority, how can you feel that 400,000 people would keep their mouths shut for 50 years? It's just implausible. Nothing is implausible, first and foremost, okay? Everything is possible. It's a probability thing, okay? And 400,000... back in the day, I mean, right now I could scream from the rooftops, hey, I was on Apollo mission, whatever, blah, blah, it was all fake. It's about if it gets viral, if it gets traction, if it goes on trending, you know what I'm saying? Like that's, and who controls that? So especially back in the day when there wasn't a YouTube, it wasn't like a person can just pop up on the television or go to the news station like a whistleblower, because the news stations were owned, as we know, by who, right? So it's very easy. You kill the people that open their mouths, you make examples out of them, right? And then on top of that, you incentivize them. So you tell them, look, you're kings of the world. You know all the truths, even if it's not really probably the real truth. They probably keep shit from them, the lower level guys too, but to appease them. Like basically when they're saying here, the engineers, technologists, machinists, electricians, they didn't go to the moon. They just worked on a thing that they were told to do. I mean, what does that even prove? So anyway, so yes, it's very possible because they have the numbers. They could fill 20 stadiums, maybe even 100 stadiums if you include their families, with people that are on the in, your neighbors. There's probably 1 out of every 10 people. What is that? There's 100 million people. If you have 5 million people, that's, you know what I'm saying? 5 out of every 100, whatever. You do the math. I'm not a mathematician. I'm a conspiracy theorist. So point being, it's very possible, in my opinion, and feasible and probable, if you ask me. So let's continue reading. If you don't trust the government, you don't trust our leaders, you don't trust authority, how can you feel that 400,000 people would keep their mouths shut? Conspiracy theories about the moon landing were not popular in the Soviet Union during the time of the space race, the competition between the Cold War rivals to achieve superior space flight capability. And I want you to see what Putin said, real tongue-in-cheek, if you ask me. Real funny, if you ask me. He's a comedian. But one prominent Russian has not embraced that conspiracy theory. Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Ziegler Youth Camp Forum in 2011. Putin was asked if he believed Americans landed on the moon, and listen to his answer. Putin replied, if it would not have been possible to falsify such an event. He compared the moon landing conspiracy theory to false claims that the United States carried out the September 11, 2001 terror attacks. Such claims are total nonsense, Putin said. So that was like a couple months into 2011. I mean, September 11th, that was 10 years later. So I don't know. He probably knew very damn well that they carried out their attacks on themselves. So with that said, I want you guys to check out the rest of the argument here and see how Joe Rogan basically argues against Matt Walsh for Flat Earth without even knowing it. Now, you could watch basically Matt Walsh's brain explode in real time when he realizes he's dealing with we didn't go to the moon person, and those people are generally hand in hand with flat earthers or hollow earthers, basically people that don't believe in none of that, see us all as the same. So Joe Rogan unwittingly joined our forces, and it's quite comical. So please enjoy. With that said, I'm going to bow out with my typical, and as always, to God be the glory.
That way, but you're being led to believe that it's a huge movement of people when it might not be. But the problem is even if it's fake, people are so stupid that even if it's a fake thing, that becomes a bit of a movement online with fake. Dumb people will jump in there, and then it'll become a real thing.
Yeah.
Like, you aware of the free bleeding movement that 4chan pushed?
Yeah, I think I heard of that. But then it became kind of real, didn't it?
It became real. That's what I'm saying. Or flat Earth is the same thing. It became a joke. If people were fucking around at first, we've known the Earth has not been flat for a long ass time, and then
But now that's totally real. I read.
now it's totally real. Now there's massive groups of people that think the Earth is flat.
Which isn't. I can't.
I can.
I don't know
can't.
how that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't. But the thing is, that's how dumb people are. That you can have a fake thing and say it enough times, and enough people will jump in and be on board with it, and then it becomes a real thing. And then you don't even have to like use propaganda anymore. These morons are doing it for you.
The thing that gets me about the flat Earth thing is because I didn't realize that it was a real thing until, I don't know, a few years ago. I posted something about it, and all these comments from real people what gets me is, well, you get the people that say, yeah, I think the Earth's flat, and that's you're just really stupid. But what I was more fascinated by the like 80% of people who. 80% of the flat Earth crowd, 80% of them, their take was, well, I'm not saying the Earth is flat, but I'm open to it. So I'm open to the possibility. How are you? I get it if you're just completely stupid and you got sucked into this cult thing, but what I don't get is how can you be on the fence about the shape of the Earth?
Well, it's just people that really are not educated. That's number one. And people that believe that there's a collusion that's so large that all of the space agencies from Japan, from China, from Russia, all of them are liars. That all of them are colluding together to hide the true shape of the Earth. Because if we really knew the Earth is flat, then it always is connected to some sort of a Bible thing. Like it's the firmament, and they believe that we're hiding the fact that God is real, and somehow there's some mass conspiracy that all these world governments and every person that ever was involved in the space agencies, they've all hid from us.
Yeah, and the moon landing. You're not you believe in the moon landing, right?
I used to believe in the moon landing.
You don't anymore?
I had a joke in my act about it, that before COVID, I would have told you vaccines the most important invention in human history, and after COVID, I'm like, I don't think we went to the moon.
Yeah, I know that was in your, but
Yeah.
you actually think that?
I think there is a less than zero possibility that we did not go to the moon.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Why do you think we went to the moon?
Because it's exactly what you just said about, well, there's a lot of reasons, but the main thing is what you just said about the Earth, the vastness of the conspiracy that would be required to fake that. It's so vast that it's a lot more incredible to believe that we faked it than to believe that we just went. And going to the moon, it's a massive achievement. But I think the greatest human achievement of all time. But even so, to fake it would be even more massive, because not only would you need all of these space agencies and all the different whatever people in American institutions to be colluding, but you'd also need foreign governments, including adversarial foreign governments, who at this point certainly would know we faked it, and for some reason haven't blown the lid on it. So they're letting us like take this achievement that they know. Like, why haven't the Russians come out and said
all those things you're saying are true? Right. I don't argue with any of the things you're saying. But one of the things that I think you have to consider was, if it's not possible for human beings to safely go through the Van Allen radiation belts and out into deep space without much protection and face the temperatures that are on the surface of the moon, which get up to 250 degrees and 250 degrees below zero in the shadows. There's no environment there. It's hostile beyond belief. Micrometeorites are flying into the moon all the time. They're flying through space all the time. We've never had a single biological organism go out into deep space, past the Van Allen radiation belts, and then come back to Earth and come back alive, except human beings during the Apollo missions. Every single space station mission, every single space shuttle mission, all of them are inside 350 miles from the Earth's surface. The only time human beings have ever been past that and through the Van Allen radiation belts was the Apollo missions. And we were the only humans that were ever able to do that. The Russians never figured out how to do it. No one else figured out how to do it but the Apollo astronauts. And we did it 7 times, 6 successfully, from 1969 to 1972. If you said to me, do you think that they could fake the moon landing today? I would say no. I would say no. People are going to be able to track it. It's very easy. They have satellites. They're going to know everything. But in 1969, the technology was so crude that when they first showed the Apollo 11 landing, they didn't even show a direct feed to the networks. So like if you're on CBS News, you don't get a direct feed. What you do is you point a camera at a projection screen. So that's why the film looks so shitty. The camera is pointed to a projection screen where you see the astronauts jumping around on the moon. And you see this weird, grainy, third generation image, right? And we did it, and we have never done it since. And we've always said we're going to do it, and no one's ever even come close. No one's ever even gone into deep space since 1972.
We also haven't been trying.
We haven't been trying. But we always talk about going back, including Herbert Walker Bush talked about going back, George W. talked about going back. They all talk about going back, but nobody ever gets anywhere.
Well, I think that's because we lost the spirit and hunger for discovery.
We didn't just lose that. We lost all the technology from the Saturn V rocket. They don't even have that anymore. In fact, they don't even have the original film. They erased all the original footage of the Apollo missions. So you just have copies of everything.
You could develop the technology again. You can do all that.
Sure you could. If you can get through the Van Allen radiation belts into deep space with human beings and have them safely come back.
But I think what you're describing to me, all that does is highlight how incredible the achievement was.
If they did it. Right, if they did it.
But I don't, well, here's the main point. There's no evidence, because saying that it was a hoax is an assertion of it's not you're not just denying an event, you're asserting a whole other event that you say happened instead. And there is evidence that we went to the moon. Now someone who's a skeptic might say it's not enough evidence or it's not good evidence. There's like evidence. There's eyewitness. There's people that went and came back and told us. There's footage. There's a lot. Okay. There is evidence.
Okay.
But there's no evidence of the hoax. Like no one has come and said, "Here's my affirmative evidence that this hoax happened." It's never happened, right, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
No one's ever provided that evidence.
I see what you're trying to say. The evidence that they went to the moon, there's a bunch, right? There's moon rocks. That's one. There's lunar reflectors that they placed on the moon. That's another. And there's a couple problems with those. First of all, the Soviets put laser reflectors on the moon as well. And also the moon itself, in many places where you shine lasers on it, it bounces back by itself. The reflective quality of the moon, the reason why the moon is so bright and white in the sky when the sun hits it, there's a certain amount of, you get a certain amount of bounce back off of different things with lasers. There's some photographs that are interesting. What was it? Was the India? What was the one where they got the most high-resolution photos of the lander?
I'm looking at Wikipedia right now of all third-party evidence of the Apollo mission.
One of the things that's interesting is they gave a moon rock to, was it a prime minister of Holland? Is that what it was? Which one was the moon rock they gave that turned out to be petrified wood? So the Apollo astronauts gave a moon rock to some foreign dignitary, and it turned out to be a piece of petrified wood. They do have samples of moon rocks that came from the moon, but we also have those on Earth. And in fact, Wernher von Braun in 1968, I believe, went to Antarctica. There's all these photographs of him in Antarctica. Antarctica is a great place to take moon rocks because Antarctica is just this gigantic sheet of white, and you can spot the meteorites in the ground. So this is the photo. I mean, this is from what? What is this from? What is the... So this is an Indian Space Research Organization's, I don't know how to say that word, Chandrayaan-2 orbiter captured images of NASA's Apollo 11 and 12 landing sites and lunar modules from 100-kilometer altitude. Apollo 12 image, astronaut boots tracks are still even visible. Due to the recent interest in another post I shared, decided to download and view the raw imagery. So that looks like there's some kind of thing on the moon.
It's pretty good evidence.
It is evidence that something's on the moon. It's not evidence that human beings went to the moon. See, we have things that are on the moon. We have things on Mars right now.
Well,
we had things that were, we'd shot things into space for sure.
Yeah, but it's evidence. It's not proof in and of itself, but it is evidence.
Listen, I'm not saying we didn't go to the moon. What I'm saying is the subject is complex. And it's not even a little complex. It's really complex. There's a documentary called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. This guy, Bart Sibrel, he's been obsessed. He was a guest on the show, too. Been obsessed about this his whole life and absolutely believes that we never went to the moon. And there's enough shit that you go, okay, if he's right about any of these things, it's weird. One of the things was some of the photographs of the moon, they ran through one of those AI detectors that can tell you whether or not something's false or artificially generated. And it showed different images from, I think it was a Chinese satellite of the moon. They said this is legitimate. But then it got to these Apollo images, and they said these have been doctored. This AI
Who said that?
this AI program that
all
they
the
ran,
images or a few of them?
A few of them.
but then other ones were found to be authentic.
I don't think so. I think they only ran a few images through. See if you can find those, Jamie. Find what they did. Again, this is not saying that we didn't go to the moon. It could be, and this was a fact with the Gemini 15 program, where Michael Collins, there was a photograph of Michael Collins that they took in one of his training exercises, where he had those packs that they put on where they can move around while they're doing moon walks, or not moon walks, space walks outside of where they're connected by a tether. And he was like in this harness and manipulating this device. And what they had done is taken a photograph of him training, and then someone, probably some overzealous PR person, had taken that photograph and then blacked out the background and tried to pass it off as a really clear photograph of him out there on a spacewalk, which is probably very difficult to get, right? You'd have to have another person at the camera, frame it right. They had this photo. They're like, look, he did it. Let's just pass this off as the real thing. Which is, you're also talking about the Nixon administration, where they were just full of shit constantly.
Remember, this is where he tried to
Yes.
claim it was from, which is a Russian video. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So there's different video where they ran it through, and they said it was real, and was it the Chinese program? But when they ran the American ones, the American images, they said that they were doctored. Again, it doesn't mean that we didn't go to the moon, but it does mean, okay, there's that. That's weird. Have you ever seen the Apollo 11 post-flight press conference?
Yeah.
It looks like a hostage video. It looks like a bunch of guys who don't want to be there. They look real fucking nervous, and they look real deceptive. And if you watch that video, it's weird.
Well, but I think that's the temperament it requires to do something like that.
Could be.
It's almost suicidal to go to the moon.
Right.
And so you have to be like not barely even a human psychologically to do it. So that to me is just like, and they just went through this whole experience. Well, who knows what that does to the human psyche? To even just like be in the vastness of space, even on the space station, I feel like that would change me as a person, not necessarily for the best.
Well, there's actually like a psychological condition that they talk about. That this sort of understanding that we're all connected. That it's like akin to a religious experience that many astronauts get when they go up to the space station and look down at the Earth and go, oh my God, what are we doing? Like, we're all together in this thing, and we're so alone in the universe. And for us to be fighting over these trivial differences and these stupid lines in the dirt that we draw, when we are like just clinging to this ball in the middle of everything.
So then what would you say, or someone who is a full-on believer,
Not a full-on believer.
someone who is a full-on believer in the moon hoax, what would they say to my other point that there is evidence we went to the moon? You can try to nitpick the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
There is zero evidence of a hoax, because that's a whole other event that would have had to have happened. There is no evidence at all, not one sliver of evidence ever, of that hoax having ever happened.
But I think that's a weird way to frame it, right? Is there evidence of a hoax of the JFK assassination, that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone? Do you think there's evidence?
Well, but the event itself, being that JFK was killed, happened.
But that's not the conspiracy. So the conspiracy is, did he act alone? And is there evidence that he didn't act alone? What do you think?
I'm very skeptical that he acted alone. Yeah.
Right. But
I don't know. I don't know exactly what happened. Nobody does.
Exactly. Same exact perspective. Same exact perspective about this moon thing. Like, it may have happened. But this was a time of deep deception in the American world. This is a time after Operation Northwoods. This is a time after the Kennedy assassination. This is a time, I mean, this is a weird fucking shaky time in terms of propaganda. This is after Eisenhower warned about the military-industrial complex. This is like, there was a lot of deception. Gulf of Tonkin incident. There's a lot of open deception that the American people were being subject to. And then there's this Cold War between us and Russia, this space war for superiority. We wanted it so bad we brought in Nazis.
But I think, I mean, the JFK is an interesting example, but because yes, there are things that I'm skeptical of that are claimed that I don't really have evidence that the thing didn't happen or that it didn't happen the way they say, but I'm still skeptical. So I get that, but it feels different to me because the JFK assassination did happen. The question is, how did it happen? But if we're going to assert that a major historical event, probably the greatest, the most significant historical event in history, or one of them, did not happen at all, no one did it, then like I said, so what you're actually claiming is that some other thing, they went somewhere and they pulled off this hoax and they planned it and they did, like an event happened where they were faking it.
Right.
And so what I would want to see, has anybody come out, any whistleblower ever, to say, hey, I was involved in the shoot, or I'm in Hollywood, I talked to a guy who was there, know,
Well,
here's
that's not even evidence. You know, the real evidence would be some sort of documentation, some sort of a way to go over, like, there's a binary code that shows the distance between the Earth and the lunar module at every stage of the journey, but that's missing. That stuff's missing. All the tracking data's, they can't find it. All the original footage is missing. And that could just be people who are really bad with historical items. That's possible. But to say that faking the moon landing would be a bigger achievement than actually going to the moon, I would say only if people could actually go to the moon. So here's the question. Can we really, everyone wants to dismiss it, can we really send a biological entity into space, go through that radiation, which is thick, covering the Earth, and have it come back alive? Well, supposedly, this is the only time people had done it, and supposedly the way they did it was by going through the top area of the Earth, where the Van Allen radiation belts. It's like kind of like a donut that covers the Earth. It's not uniform, and there's an area at the top where you can go out. But according to Bart Sibrel, they didn't go that way because you would have had to launch from Antarctica to do that. It's not really possible that happened, that they went that way. So he thinks that if they did go through that, there is no other examples of living things that have done that and come back alive. And they've known that this is an issue. They've known that this Van Allen radiation belts, which is this band of heavy radiation that covers the Earth and protects us, they've known that it's out there because they tried to blow it up once. There was a thing called Operation Starfish Prime, where they launched one of several nuclear bombs into the radiation belt to try to blow a hole through it. And unfortunately,
when did that happen?
67 maybe? It was Starfish Prime. But it did the opposite effect.
Why did they do that? Just for the
They wanted to see what happens.
shits and giggles?
Well, they had so much power, and you know, you've got nuclear bombs, and you can't blow people up, but you're still doing studies. So they're doing tests all throughout Nevada. And I mean, that's what killed John Wayne. John Wayne got cancer because he was working on a set doing a Western right next to where they were blowing up nuclear bombs. There were like 200 people on the set got cancer. Starfish Prime high-altitude nuclear test conducted by the United States, a joint effort of the Atomic Energy Commission and the Defense Atomic Support Agency, July 9th, 1962. So this is like while Kennedy was in office. They were trying to figure out we will get to the moon, not in this decade, but in the other, or whatever he said. High-altitude nuclear test. So the thing it did, unfortunately, was it supercharged the bands, and it made it have much more radiation. Not only that, it blew out power in some parts of Hawaii, I think. I think it cooked a few satellites, right? We talked about this the other day. It cooked a few satellites.
Okay, so can I ask this, though? Do we have examples? So we're saying, well, we don't know if a human can go through the...
Right.
I would say, well, we do know because they did.
If they did.
Well, but if
we know they sent people into near-Earth orbit. That's a fact. We know that...
Well, how do we know that if we don't know? I mean, maybe there's space
because
stations.
we actually can see that. We can see where they launched. You can follow the trajectory. You can know about the propulsion units that they used. You know about what they were trying to accomplish, and you can watch it.
So my question is, have we tried to send humans through the radiation belt and not been able to? Has that happened?
They never even tried that. They just did it.
Right.
That's what's even crazier.
So, but how do we know? So
how do we know they did it? If the only time they did it,
how do we know
was,
they can't?
The last time they did it was 1972. You don't think that's a little weird?
Not really.
No. Listen.
I don't think
even
it's
if
weird.
they did go to the moon, let's say I'll say they went to the moon. It's fucking weird. Everything from 1969 is easier, cheaper, and faster to reproduce today, except the moon landing, except space travel.
I just don't think
but
there's a will.
we thought. What?
I don't think there's a will.
Do you know how much fucking resources there is on the moon? Do you know how many valuable minerals there are on the moon, and trillions of dollars of things that are very difficult to find in the United States are on the moon?
I don't think the people in the 1960s, the American people cared deeply about going to the moon. I don't think that these days I think we should care about that, but most people don't care about.
If we found out that we didn't have to dig for lithium, that we could just go to the moon and pull giant chunks of it out and not have slave labor and no one has to feel bad about using your iPhone, you don't think that they would do that? Of course they would do that if they could. If you could have a mining station on the moon, no problem at all, totally safe, of course they would do that.
Yeah. And I think, and
It only takes
I
2
agree.
weeks to get there. People mine in northern territories, like people mine in Canada in these horrible conditions,
I know.
fucking freezing cold out. And,
But it probably takes a lot of time to get to a point where you can do that consistently.
right,
and
but it's
cost-effective.
so valuable.
I know.
The idea that they wouldn't do that, and they haven't done anything even remotely close to that since 1972, is weird.
I agree that it's. I mean, weird makes it sound necessarily nefarious. I think it's
No, just weird. It's very unusual.
I'd say
It's unusual
it's
technologically.
incongruent.
It's incongruent with technological progression.
Yeah.
We have that with everything else. Everything else. Phones are in your fucking pocket now, and they have more computing power than the entire cluster that they used to launch the Apollo program. The Apollo program was a fucking giant room full of computers. Your phone is significantly more powerful than that.
Yeah.
Everything else got better, except that. We thought that people were going to be going to space all the time. You ever watch that TV show Space 1999 when you were a kid?
No.
You're younger than me. There was a stupid show called Space 1999, and they thought, boy, by 1999 we'll be flying around spaceships and people will be living on the moon. Every time they've done, like in the past, like after the moon landings, every time they did any sort of like science fiction movie, it always involved like colonies already established on the moon and on Mars and people traveling, because we thought that was going to happen. Orville and Wilbur Wright, right? Think about the launch of the first airplane and then the launch of the Apollo program. It's only like 60 years. It's kind of crazy. The launch of the first airplane ever and dropping nuclear bombs out of an airplane is only like, what is it, 50 years? I think it's something like something kooky.
Yeah.
50, 60 years. That's nuts.
I agree,
But then now you have supersonic jets, like 100 years later.
Yeah.
Now you have insane capabilities of like Air Force fighter jets. Unbelievable power and maneuverability, far beyond anything anybody would have possibly imagined when Orville and Wilbur had that stupid fucking bird-looking flimsy thing. So everything progresses technologically, except
Well, but here's what I would say to that.
traveling to other planets.
I would say two things. Number one, I think that it does take. Yeah, we're kind of spoiled by the fact that there was this burst of incredible technological advancement.
In everything.
Right.
In
It do-
automobiles.
It doesn't necessarily. Not every facet of technology is going to continue at that pace forever into an infinity. So I think it does take, especially if you take a historical perspective, a longer-term historical perspective, it just takes a while to get from one thing to the next. It hasn't even been that long. I mean, 1969 was not that long ago from the historical perspective, and especially if you want to do the next thing. I mean, what's the next thing? The next thing is to go to Mars. Most people agree. That's so much exponentially farther away and harder to do.
Sure.
And so if it takes decades more to figure out how to do that, that doesn't seem that crazy to me. And the second thing I'll say is that I do think, I get your point about resources on the moon. There's a reason to go back. I agree, practically speaking, but it's just true that it requires a society that deeply values exploration for its own sake and is willing to make the sacrifices, is willing to send people off to do things just for the sake of exploration, knowing that they might die. I think we have almost no appetite for that now. Maybe the Challenger explosion was, you could point to that as the time when we sort of just, we have no appetite for people. We don't want people to die for this
I
anymore.
see what you're saying. Here's the problem with what you're saying. The American people don't get a say in whether or not we do things. Like, they don't get a say in whether or not we make a space shuttle. They don't get to decide whether or not we establish a new space station. No one talks about it. They just do it. Like, we barely get a say in how much money goes to Ukraine.
Yeah, but it's got to be funded.
Right, but how much is funded to go to Ukraine? Like, all of a sudden, they had $175 billion plus to fund this proxy war. And who decided that?
But
It wasn't the American people, right?
It wasn't, but unfortunately, but politicians are the ones who decide it. But people vote for those politicians, and unfortunately, there are a lot of Americans who are basically okay with sending money to Ukraine, which they shouldn't be. It's insane.
I agree with you. But what my point is that if you had a skillful politician who got on television and explained that we have found a solution to all of our energy problems, and it's mining on the moon. And through this mining on the moon, we are going to increase the overall way of life for every single human being on America's soil. We are going to raise everybody above the poverty level. There'll be no impoverished people, because we have literally found trillions of dollars in very, very valuable minerals. And by using our United States taxpayers' funds to fund this program and to finance it. We are going to allow the entire country to share in some of this wealth, and we're going to change energy distribution and consumption in this country in an incredible way. It's going to be beneficial to everybody, and it's going to make a bunch of people really rich too. But it's going to change the quality of life for every person in this country, and this is how we're going to do it. Everybody would be on board.
Yeah, but nobody's made that case, really.
Right, but you could make that case with the amount of minerals and the amount of valuable resources you can get, not just from the moon, but also from mining asteroids, which they're attempting to do now. If you can get people out there, if you really could get people out there. So here's the question. If you couldn't do it, if they knew they couldn't do it, but they wanted to show that they could do it, could they compartmentalize things? Could they feed a computer program that is, instead of the actual binary data that shows the distance between the lunar module and the surface of the Earth at any given time, could they just calculate that out with computers? Of course they could. Yeah, that's possible. Could they, if they couldn't get human beings into deep space and have them come back alive because they couldn't figure out a way to get through the Van Allen radiation belts and survive micrometeors and all the other shit that you deal with, could they get enough people to shut the fuck up because it's in the best interest of national security? Of course they could, especially in 1969. People were fucking terrified. They had just killed the president 6 years earlier. People were absolutely terrified of getting under the sights of the intelligence agencies. And if you have top secret clearance, if you're involved in some sort of a project, like look at the Manhattan Project. People kept their fucking mouth shut. They knew they were working on something of importance that was above and beyond their need to yap about shit.
But for the moon landing, you would need way more people involved.
I don't know
more
if you would,
institutions
because you actually have a real space program. So the space program's not fake, right? So let's just assume I'm a non-believer. I would tell you that the space program was absolutely real. The Saturn V rocket was absolutely real. The modules, the way they were able to parachute down into the ocean, 100% real. They did go into space. But how far did they go? This is the real question. And Bart Sibrel, the guy who made this documentary, he asserts that they went somewhere into Earth's orbit, like, in space, but not through the Van Allen radiation belts and not to the surface of the moon and back. And that they had video footage that they had done in some scenario. Some people think it's in the Nevada desert. Who knows what it is? But they had this footage of people bouncing around, and they said they got it on the moon, and then they brought this back.
Does he have any evidence of that event occurring? Would he say, well, I know they only went so far and came back because of this? Well,
he has a bunch of different things, and one of them is the one that's like very hotly debated, and it's the different light sources in the photographs. So a lot of the photographs from the surface of the moon have intersecting shadows. So you have a shadow that's going this way and another shadow that's going that way, indicating more than one light source or a close by light source that's, coming in, not something that's, millions of miles away like the sun. There's those. There's the photographs. There's the photographs that run through AI. He has this other video of what looks like them filming the Earth through one of the round portal windows with everything blacked out in the cabin. And then they pull down the things that were blocking off the other light sources, and the cabin floods with light, and it looks like they're in near-Earth orbit. And it's very confusing because you're like, well, what is that video? What exactly is going on there? Because if they really are in deep space and they really are filming this small image of the Earth, because that's all they can see from 200,000 miles out, well, why, when they take those things down, does it look like the whole cabin is filled with light? Why does it look exactly like they're in near Earth orbit?
But that still goes back.
Have you ever seen it?
The specific.
You want to see it?
Sure.
For shits and giggles. Yeah, because we're in the middle of this stupid conversation. It's a fun one. It's one of the most fun of all conspiracy theories. Because if they did it, wow. First of all, if they killed the president, wow. And it seems like they kind of did that. So if they did this too, like, what else did they do? Like, what other hoaxes were played on the American people if this is real? That's why it's fun. I'm not saying it's real, but it is a fun one. It's not as simple as the Earth is flat. That's a stupid one. But this is a fun one. This is a fun one because you're dealing with the kind of power with complete control over the media, complete control over newspapers and what they reported, the interest of national security, the Cold War with Russia, the space war with Russia. We wanted it so bad, we brought in some of the most heinous human beings that have ever lived to run our NASA program.
Yeah, it's not as dumb as flat Earth, but it does remind. To me, it reminds me of. To me, it's in the vein of like Sandy Hook was a hoax.
No.
Well, I'll tell you why.
That's heinous.
Not morally.
Let me show you the video.
Okay.
Jamie, you got that? Funny thing happened on the way to the moon.
I know, but I can't.
Is he hiding it? I know it's available.
Sure. I'm not even. I have to figure out exactly what the video is I'm looking for.
Proof.
I know. I'm digging through. I pick a video. I try to find it. It's not in there. I have to find another video. It's not like.
Okay, you'll
I
find
know
it.
the exact name of the video. It takes a second.
Okay, you'll find it. He'll find it once he does. Again, I'm not saying we didn't go. I'm saying this is a fun one and it's a weird one. There's a lot of weirdness to it.
Isn't it similar? Okay, because a lot of this comes from it's such an incredible feat that's so difficult to do that it's hard to believe anyone actually did it.
Sure.
Which I can understand that mentality. But the thing is, you can go back in history and you can look at for the sake of discovery and exploration, you can look at what other men have done hundreds of years ago that arguably is more impressive than going to the moon.
Like what?
I mean, you name it. Like take any famous explorer from like the 1500s to the 1800s, and whether it's Magellan or James Cook or Christopher Columbus or any of them, what they were able to do navigating this vast ocean, going to play, having no modern technology at all, being able to go from where their starting point, hit some little tiny island somewhere, and then go around and navigating a world that they don't even know what it looks like. They have no maps, they have no GPS, they have nothing at all. I cannot conceive of how they could have ever done that. I don't know how in the world, not knowing what the world looks like, having no map, having no GPS, having no modern navigation whatsoever, how in the world could you possibly get on a ship in, launching out of France or Portugal or wherever and make it anywhere across the ocean? How could you? I don't know how you could do it.
It's incredible.
But
it's incredible.
But we know that it happened.
Okay, it's incredible, but it doesn't compare because they do it now easily. So anybody can get in a ship right now and travel. You can get in a small boat that you have enough resources and you have enough gas and you can travel through these routes. You can do it.
It took them hundreds of years, though.
But you can do it right now. It's way easier to do now, right? So it's something that they did that's incredible, no doubt, no argument. But something that could be reproduced today easily. Or at least possibly. I wouldn't say easily. It's a task.
But it also took centuries to get to the point where it could be easily
but it got better right after each one did it because they had maps now. And then they also used their sextants and they understood constellations in a way that most people don't today. And sextants are, if you actually use them correctly and you understand which way the tides go and which way the water currents are going, which way the flow is happening, they had a deep understanding of the currents of the earth. They knew travel lanes, and they knew which ways they could go with ships. So applying that to the open ocean, applying that to these continents they weren't even sure were there, it was very iffy, very dangerous, very courageous. But once they did it, then everybody else could do it easier. And then they started doing it better and better. And then people started coming to America and then and now here we are. And now anybody can get in a boat. Anybody with enough resources can have a boat that can travel those routes. No one can just say, I want to go to the moon today and get their private moon craft and fucking shoot off into the atmosphere and land on the moon. So no one's done that since 1969. That's a recent occurrence in terms of like human history, but not technologically. The technology from 1969 is not even, it's like cave people shit compared to what we have today. So you really can't compare the courageous, amazing deeds of these early explorers, because what they did was absolutely fantastic, but they left a clear record of how to do it, and then each person improved upon it, and now it's easy to do.
But it was still, I mean,
the spacecraft travel is not. There's nothing like that.
I would say 100 years from now,
perhaps,
check in.
maybe.
Christopher Columbus was 300 years before James Cook, I think. The technology they were using was not that different. It was pretty similar. It didn't progress that fast.
Well, they had maps. They had maps and they had sextants and they had a detailed, at least crude understanding of the shape of certain continents. Like there's maps from the 1500s, there's maps from before that. There's plenty of maps that are rough estimates and pretty good job actually. The cartographers back then were astonishingly good because it was so valuable to be good at that. Now this is the footage. So let's just watch this. So this is Neil Armstrong talking to Houston. So give me some volume.
Another segment. Also,
I don't think we can do that.
Why is that?
We're not watching the movie.
All right, so let's do this. He and I will watch it with the sound on, and we'll tell everybody else to just go to the website or go to the YouTube video. So we don't get pulled off of YouTube. We'll watch it, and we won't say anything, and then after it's over, we'll come back. So play it, because I want them to hear it.
air after review.
That's enough. So what do you think about that footage?
I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm at a slight disadvantage because I'm going to assume that people have addressed some of those issues and have given responses to it. I'm going to assume. Like if I went to YouTube right now and looked up that video debunked, people have probably done
I'm
that.
sure someone has.
So I don't know what their response would be. So it's interesting. I just don't see it. So to me, I listen to that and I think, well, that's interesting. I look into that to figure out what. The first thing I'd want to know is, okay, here's your claim, the claim they're making. I need to know what is the official narrative. Let's say, how do they respond to that? Because I know they do.
Right.
So I need to know that.
Well, here's two problems with that video. One, the English accent. Those motherfuckers. If they want to sell you something on late night TV, they use an English accent because it makes someone look more intelligent, more sophisticated. The crescent insert. Why would they fake any of it? And then they got you with the music. The music is manipulative. So they're manipulating you in two ways. They're manipulating you with the woman's voice, and they're manipulating you with the music. The music.
Wait, so you're saying they are manipulating you with the video?
I'm saying they most certainly are manipulating you in that video. That video is not just the video. So what I would rather have is just the video and watch that. But we do get to see them say the distance they are from the Earth. Here's a couple of questions, right? What does it look like? What is the shine from the Earth from 200,000 miles out? And maybe in order to be able to film that, you have to block off the light from all those other windows, because even though it's 200,000 miles out, just like the moon lights up the sky on a night where there's a full moon and you're outside, you can see. Like a really good full moon with a clear sky, you can see the ground. It lights it up. And the moon is 1/4 of the Earth's size, and the moon is 250,000+ miles away. So if something is 4 times bigger than the moon, and the blue from the Earth's oceans, like when you see it from the space station, it is powerful. I mean, it is a potent reflector of sunlight. So you could say that he's just ignorant about how much reflection you would get from the surface of the Earth from 200,000 miles away. And even though they are filming it by blocking out all the lights and filming it through this window, that actually is the Earth. That's actually what it looks like when you're in deep space. You could say that too. You just don't know. And it's hard to figure out what's what. It's hard to figure out what's what. But when you see a video like that, you just go, okay, what is that? And I don't think it's impossible to fake people going to the moon. I think it'd be very difficult. It would require a lot of people to be on board, but I also think it could be compartmentalized. The people that make the rockets, what you're doing is you're making a specific part, and this guy's making another part, and you have the engineers put this thing together, and you launch this thing into space. The people that would have to know are the people that are actually charting the trajectory of the Apollo mission, the people that are actually talking to the astronauts and explaining to them what to say during the press conference, the people that are engineering the whole thing. And you could probably get away with doing something like that with a few hundred people. And you could get a few hundred people of high-ranking people that have top secret clearance keep their mouth shut.
You could. I would need some kind of solid evidence of that to believe that's true. And
me too.
This to me, there are some things that we call conspiracy theories that I think are, clearly true. There are some things that we call conspiracy theories that I think are maybe true. But there are conspiracy theories that to me are just that. They're not even theories, really. They're just kind of like fanciful, projections. And the ones that I don't find convincing are where they usually start with, there's a so-called official narrative of a thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of things about what actually happened that are kind of weird. And we look at that and go, that's a little bit weird. And then the conspiracy theorists, in that case, they come in and they find these little tiny cracks, if you want to call it. And then inside the cracks, they shove this whole like Hollywood cinematic narrative that they have created to explain what's actually like a pretty tiny crack. You don't need this whole thing to explain that. So with the moon thing, I mean, one of the first sort of weird aspects of the moon landing that I think started kind of the conspiracy theories about it was the flag, the fact that the flag's moving in the picture. And so, yeah, it's like when you look at that, you don't really understand. You're like, well, that is weird because there's no wind on the moon. But then you understand that, okay, for example, when you put the flag down, it creates reverberations. It makes the flag move. It's going to move for longer because there's no gravity. So there's an explanation for that. But if you're the conspiracy theorist, then you take the flag moving and you're like, nope, the whole thing is bunk.
Have you ever seen the video footage of the astronaut hopping by the flag, and the breeze of him hopping by makes the flag wiggle? He doesn't touch the flag at all. The flag is completely stationary, and the astronaut hops by the flag, and as he hops by the flag wiggles.
Okay, are we saying that wouldn't happen on the moon?
No, it wouldn't. There's no air.
Yeah, okay. I haven't seen that.
We'll show it to you. It's weird. Listen, what you're saying is
And are we sure
entirely correct. Everything you're saying is entirely reasonable and correct if they actually can get through the Van Allen radiation belts. If they can, this is stupid. This whole thing's stupid. But if they can't really do that, and they never have done that, and the only time they say they've done that is these missions, it gets real weird. And since they haven't done it since then, it gets real weird. And it's not just that. There's other video footage. It's not just the one where the guy's hopping by the flag. It's other ones where it looks like they're on wires, where they're being pulled up, where they fall down, they're being yanked up. The whole thing is weird. There's a lot of weirdness to the footage. The physics don't line up exactly the same. If you go to the early days of the like Apollo 11 footage, and you look at the difference between when they were playing golf and jumping around the moon, they move different. They cover more distance. It's like it looks different. They got better at it. They get better at filming it. They got better at whatever they're doing. And then there's the other question. Maybe they actually did do it, but the cameras weren't able to handle the radiation, and the film, which, you wouldn't even be able to send your film through the radar detector at the airport back then because it would get fucked up. You'd have to put it aside. Maybe the radiation of space fucks up the film, so even though they did do it, they show you recreations or show you these test runs that they did, and they film it because the actual film footage is impossible to obtain. That's possible too. Hasselblad, who made the cameras, didn't put any special protection in these cameras. There's nothing about them that was unusual that would be able to withstand that kind of radiation and the kind of heat of deep space.
Yeah.
Steve, do you have that one where the guy walks by the flag and he hops around and it wiggles?
I typed that in and it's not really popping up, so I'm not sure which video.
We definitely have played it before.
I know, but if you take a look, that's what's popping up. It's not that one, I don't think. Is it? It's not a
Plant flag. No, that's not it. What did you write? Astronaut flag.
wiggle moon? No.
Type in astronaut hops by flag. Flag wiggles.
I saw a bunch of videos of people making recreations and seeing if this was even possible, but not the video.
Astronaut hops by, causing a breeze to move the flag. Okay, that's it right there. Click on that. That's it. That's the footage. Okay. So watch. So he's gonna hop by.
Okay.
See that?
Yeah, but he could have hit the flag.
Yeah, but he didn't. Look at the distance. Look how far away he is from it. Pull it back again. See where he is? So he's in front. He's way in front of that thing. He hops by and it wiggles.
I don't know. He's in the suit. The suit's pretty clunky.
Yeah, but he's not close to it. Look at the perspective. Let's look at it in slow motion. So watch, he hops by and it just wiggles in the breeze. That's a breeze, dude. So that might not have actually happened on the moon, okay? That might be footage that they filmed in the Nevada desert, and the footage they got on the moon got all fucked up, and so they tried to pass that off on people, and they thought that no one would know. It doesn't necessarily mean we didn't go to the moon, but that does look weird. And it's just not, it's not one thing. If that was the only thing, you'd be like, oh, well, who knows? But there's a lot of them.
He could have hit it. I mean, it's close.
It's possible.
It's close.
It doesn't look like he hit it. It looks like a breeze.
Yeah, but then the other part of this is that the people that went through all this trouble to fake the moon landing, how would they miss these things? That's the other.
Well, I don't think they thought people would catch it. First of all, you're dealing with a time where there's no VHS tapes. There's no internet, right? So you show it on television once. You get to choose what gets shown and what doesn't get shown. You film a bunch of shit. That's how they got that footage of them inside the craft filming through that circular hole. Because they don't air everything on television, but you have archives. So you have all these archives, and these kooks go through the archives, and they find things like that. Okay, but that doesn't even mean that was actual moon footage. That could have been some of the training footage.
I'll tell you what would convince me to, not that it's a fake, but at least would make me open to it. One thing that would shake my faith considerably in the moon landing, if Elon Musk were to come out and say, yeah, I don't know about this moon landing thing, then okay, fine. Because, and I'm not saying this is my whole reason for believing it happened, but Elon Musk, first of all, if the moon landing was fake, he knows it was. He knows it was fake.
Sure.
He's the richest man in the world. He's shown zero concern for, propping up official narratives at all.
Right.
So he's a guy that would know if it's faked, would there'd be no reason for him to continue that narrative if it was fake. In fact, he could even say, they faked it. I'm going to do it for real. I'll be the first one to go to the moon because they faked it. And he hasn't said that, so I also find that to be pretty compelling. The fact that he, as someone who would know, that's the other problem is that you and I, and most people that talk about this, we have no direct access to knowledge about space. This is all being given to us by other people. So you got to go to people that are working with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that he has no time for this theory at all, I also find to be persuasive.
It's good. It is persuasive, definitely. But also, he has a contract with NASA, and he has to be very careful about what he says and does. And for him to say something incredibly insane, like we never went to the moon, even if he believes it, that would be a big risk with zero reward, because there's no way to prove, as you've said, there's no way to prove that we didn't go to the moon. And to say that we didn't go to the moon is a kook take. Like, that's what the fuck is wrong with you? You can say stupid things like that when you're a comedian who's a podcast host. But if you have contracts with NASA and you run SpaceX and you are legitimately making some of the greatest breakthroughs in space travel that human beings have ever known, like what they're doing with those Falcons when they have them land, fucking insane. Come back and land. I mean, we've never been able to do that before, and it's all because of Elon. I mean, if he really is going to get people to Mars, something has got to be addressed eventually as to, if they do it and they pull it off and it's easy and comfortable, okay, we probably did it in 1969. If they go to the moon and there's no problem going through the Van Allen radiation belts with no particular insulation other than what the spaceship had, maybe. Yeah, they probably did it.
Well, I will say, I don't even, the moon landing hoax idea it's barely even a kook take anymore. I think it is, but you're probably in the majority with your take on it. And the last time I talked about this publicly, I got absolutely ripped to shreds. I mean, it felt like 99% against. And it's going to happen again in response to this conversation.
99% against you?
Yeah.
Against your take. So most people think that we didn't go to the moon.
It seems...
Maybe that's your followers, bro. I think if you get the overall internet, it would go the other way. The overall internet, most people would think you're a kook for even entertaining the idea that we never went to the moon.
Maybe, but it seems like it's shifting drastically. And a lot of that is people just have lost all faith in our institutions, which I understand.
Yes.
So people are... I mean, that was kind of the point of your bit, that is, people are... Once you see that this is a lie, this is a lie, this is a lie.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that is happening. And I'm totally sympathetic to that part of it. But I just think that the moon landing is... There's a lot of good evidence for it. And also, this is an emotional argument.
Yeah, it's an American thing.
It's one of our greatest achievements as Americans.
Sure.
Like, you got to pry that from my cold dead hands. I mean, you got to really show me something to make me willing to give that up.
I would tell you that one of our greatest achievements is faking the moon landing.
I could be.
I think it's an amazing achievement. It's akin to turning Kamala Harris into the most compelling presidential candidate.